Europe is exploding. Farmers from all across the continent are rising up in a mass revolt against the green initiatives coming from the bullies in Brussels and the demons in Davos. And it's only just the beginning. This uprising is going to absolutely blow your minds, and you're going to get a front row seat for a patriot backlash that may indeed end up bringing down the European Parliament and the WEF. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent times. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Before we begin, gang, I do want to give a heartfelt thanks. As many of you know, Big Tech has demonetized our channel, which is obviously a major blow in our ability to communicate with each other each and every day. But thousands of you stepped in and helped blunt that blow by joining our Insiders Club over the last few weeks. And I mean thousands of you. You stuck it to Big Tech by joining our Insiders Club, and that way you thwarted any and all attempts by Big Tech to make us lose contact with one another and to disparage us and discourage us, to make us feel like we're alone. You stood up against that, and I cannot thank you enough. For those of you who have yet to join our Insiders Club, if you're so inclined, just click on that link below. Join thousands of patriots just like you who are taking back our country each and every week. But most importantly, we're doing it together. Farmers all across Europe are rising up against the radical green policies that are being imposed on them by the demons in Davos and the bullies in Brussels. The continent-wide revolt began most recently in the nation of Germany. The leftist German government there, led by the Green Party's Olaf Scholz, in, of course, an effort to greenify their nation, they announced plans to get rid of a tax break for agricultural vehicles, as well as subsidies for diesel, the elimination of which would make agricultural endeavors almost impossible for a number of German farmers. And so, very much like what we saw in the Netherlands over the last year, or something comparable to the Freedom Convoy in Canada, German farmers rebelled. They rose up en masse against what they consider to be radically draconian policies of the left-wing government, and they're demanding that that government resign and hold snap elections. And as it turns out, the German farmers have struck a match that's lit up a powder keg throughout the continent. In France, farmers are rising up there in protest against their government's similar EU WEF inspired green initiatives. Roads are being blocked all across the nation. Whole sections of cities are being shut down, akin to Canada's Freedom Convoy. Highways are being blocked across the country, and manure and agricultural waste are being dropped outside of politicians and public offices. Bales of hay are being spread throughout globalist fast food restaurants like McDonald's. It is without question a thoroughly anti-globalist, anti-WEF protest. But it's not just Western Europe. In Poland, farmers there have begun to rise up against their newly elected leftist pro-EU government. Their radically globalist Prime Minister Donald Tusk is bowing the knee to the greenest of green initiatives that are crippling farmers and Poland's agricultural industry. The farmers there are rising up, as well as in Lithuania, where farmers there are showing their solidarity with the anti-globalist uprising, pushing back against their own government's attempts at imposing radical and draconian green energy initiatives on their national agricultural industry. Romanian farmers as well are joining the continent-wide revolt, showing their solidarity with European farmers against these globalist schemes. In fact, the revolt has hit as far north as Scotland. Scottish farmers are openly claiming that this is ultimately about preserving their way of life in the face of these agricultural threats from the technocratic tyrants in the EU and the WEF. Now, what we're seeing here is a massive backlash against a particularly European globalism in what the scholar Jan Zielonka calls Neomedievalism, which is just basically an off-brand of the neo-feudalism that we talk so much about on this channel, which has taken over here in the United States. With the rise of the European Union and the European Parliament and the European Court of Justice, European politicians have forged a complex, multi-layered, caste-like system of political power, at the center of which is a centralized administrative body located in Brussels. And ever since the Amsterdam Treaty was signed, This centralized administrative body, namely the European Parliament, but most particularly the European Commission, European Council, they've increasingly been intervening and enforcing their will on member states. And so the net result of this neomedievalism is that individual European nations have largely lost their political sovereignty. So today, as we speak, individual European states simply are no longer regarded as the sole and sovereign center of power within their own borders. And more of the populations throughout Europe are reaching critical mass in terms of their bottled up frustration over the fact that no one in political power is listening to them, that the bullies in Brussels are refusing to take their values, interests, and concerns seriously, and are instead superimposing from on high, from top down, their own agendas, their own plans, their own social engineering, completely irrespective of the will of the people on the ground, as it were. And so Europe is, in effect, blowing up. This farmers' uprising itself, a massive backlash against this neo-medievalist system that they believe, for very good reason, is radically anti-liberal and anti-democratic. In other words, the neo-medievalist system of the EU is, in point of fact, everything it claims to be against. It is tyrannical. It is dictatorial. It is authoritarian. And European farmers have had it. And they're rising up, and the revolt is growing by the day. And the beauty is, it's working. Reports are that the bullies in Brussels are feeling the heat. They're under enormous pressure to diffuse this uprising, specifically by capitulating to the farmers' demands. Already, we've seen at least one European government collapse from all of this. The so-called far-right, ultra-right Geert Wilders stunned the political establishment by winning the elections in the Netherlands just weeks ago. Now, Wilders was catapulted to the top by the tens of thousands of Dutch farmers who rose up against the previous Dutch government's attempts to basically shut down the Dutch agricultural industry. The uprising forced the previous Dutch government of globalist Mark Rutte to collapse, which paved the way for the rise of Geert Wilders and the Dutch Freedom Party. And we've already seen one government collapse over this. And so it appears we may, in fact, be seeing two more on the brink. And that's, of course, France and Germany. In both countries as we speak, not only are farmers rising up, but we're seeing the nationalist populist right surging in popularity as well. Both Marine Le Pen in France and the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, they're pulling at all-time highs in their respective nations. And the so-called far right, which is simply the nationalist populist revolt against this neo-medievalized EU, is growing so fast that they may ironically end up taking over the European Parliament in this year's elections. And if that's the case, and in many respects, the farmers will have successfully stormed Brussels, and a new era of national sovereignty throughout Europe may indeed be the result.